The sun was just rising over the wide plains when Tawakana, a young Sioux warrior, returned from an early morning hunt. The air was cool, carrying the smell of pine and the distant sound of horses moving through the grass. He walked with steady steps, expecting to find his village quiet as usual. But something strange stopped him at the edge of the camp. A soft voice floated through the air, gentle and warm, a kind of sound he had never heard inside a Sioux village. It was a woman's voice, smooth like running water, full of calm and sadness at the same time. Tawakana froze, his hand going to the knife at his belt, because no woman in the tribe sang like this. And no outsider should dare enter a Sioux lodge without permission. His heart beat harder when he realized where the sound came from, his father's lodge. His father, Wichipi, an old blind man respected by the whole tribe, rarely allowed anyone inside except his son. Tawakana moved quickly, every muscle tight, every sense alert, ready to face whatever danger waited inside as he approached. He saw the flap of the lodge slightly open, and the soft voice continued, almost like a prayer. It wasn't the voice of a Sioux woman, nor someone from any nearby tribe. It was the voice of a white woman. Something completely unexpected and impossible to ignore. He stepped inside with silent feet, ready to protect his father at all costs. But the sight he found inside made him stop in shock. A young white woman sat beside Wichipi, holding his hand gently, her head bowed as she sang a sweet, slow melody. Her clothes were torn, dusty, and worn from travel, and her hair fell loosely over her shoulders like she had been running for days. Most shocking of all was Wichipi's face, usually tired and without expression, now calm and lifted toward her voice. Almost as if he could see again, Tawakana stood still, struggling to understand what he was seeing. His first instinct was to drag her out and demand answers. But something in his father's peaceful expression stopped him. Wichipi had not smiled in many moons. Yet now his mouth curved slightly as the melody filled the lodge. It was as if her voice reached inside his blind world and brought light back for a moment. Tawakana felt anger, confusion, and curiosity all at once. Who was this woman? And how did she dare touch his father? The woman's voice trembled slightly when she noticed the warrior's presence. She stopped singing and looked up with wide, frightened eyes, her lips parted as if she wanted to speak. But fear held her tongue still. She looked weak, hungry, and exhausted, like someone who had been through more trouble than her body could carry. Yet there was no threat in her face, only fear and desperation. Wichipi lifted his head toward the sound of his son's breathing. Tawakana, he said softly, do not frighten her. His voice was calm, peaceful. Unlike anything the warrior had heard in a long time, Tawakana felt his anger fade, replaced by confusion. Father, he said, keeping his voice low, who is this woman? How did she enter our village? Wichipi's old hands rested in the woman's lap. Trusting and gentle, she was crying outside. The blind elder replied, lost, cold, afraid. I heard her voice before I knew her face, and I brought her inside. Tawakana clenched his jaw, unable to understand why his father would take such a risk. A white woman in the middle of a Sioux camp was a danger to her and to everyone else. If any warriors had found her first, she might not be alive outside the lodge. The village had already noticed the stranger. Murmurs rose, people whispering, wondering, doubting, maybe even fearing what this meant. Some children peeked from behind their mothers, trying to catch a glimpse of the woman who dared sit beside the blind elder. A few hunters gathered near the door, ready to act if Tawakana gave the order. Stories of recent conflicts with nearby settlers made everyone tense. One mistake could bring trouble to the whole tribe. Inside the lodge, the woman finally found her voice. I'm sorry, she whispered, her accent soft but shaking. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I only wanted help. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at Tawakana. Unsure if she would live another minute, she seemed so fragile. Like a bird caught in the middle of a storm with nowhere to fly, Tawakana lowered his hand from his knife. But he didn't relax completely. He looked at his father again. At the peace written on his blind face, something told him this woman was not an enemy, but he could not trust her yet. Her voice had brought comfort to his father, something even he could not do in recent years. But the village was watching. Danger was close, and Tawakana knew everything was about to change. The soft-voiced woman had entered their world without warning. Now, none of them knew what her presence would mean. Not for Wichipee, not for the warrior, and not for the entire Sioux village. Tawakana watched the young woman closely as she sat beside his blind father. Her hands still trembling from fear, the village murmurs grew louder outside. But inside the lodge, there was only silence. A tense and heavy silence that waited for the truth. The warrior stood tall, his shadow stretching across the floor like a warning. But he kept his voice steady so his father would not worry. "Who are you?" he asked firmly. "And why are you in our village?" The woman swallowed hard before she spoke. "My name is Anna," she whispered, touching her chest gently as if she needed courage to say her own name. "I didn't come here to hurt anyone. I only wanted to survive." Her voice cracked, not because she lied, but because the memories behind her words carried too much pain. Wichipee rested his hand lightly on her arm, encouraging her to continue. "She was lost," the old man said softly. I heard fear in her breath. She needed a place to rest. Tawakana did not lower his guard, but he listened because his father's voice carried truth even when his eyes could not. Anna took a shaky breath and began her story. "I was traveling with a small group," she said. "We were moving west, trying to find new land and a chance to start over." Her eyes drifted down as tears gathered. "But 2 days ago, someone attacked us. I don't know who they were." She paused, wiping her face with the back of her dusty sleeve. "They fired guns. People screamed. Everyone ran." Tawakana exchanged a look with his father. Attacks on travelers were not unusual on the frontier, but rarely did a lone woman survive such chaos. He wondered how far she had walked, how much she had suffered before reaching their camp. Anna continued, her voice hollow but honest. "I ran into the woods. I didn't know where I was going. It was dark, cold, and I didn't have food or water for a long time. I thought I was going to die." Her fingers tightened around the edge of Wichipee's blanket as she spoke, almost as if she feared the memory could drag her back into the forest. "I followed a sound," she said slowly, "a drum. I thought maybe it was a group passing by." She looked up at Tawakana, her eyes full of both apology and hope. "I walked toward it. And somehow I ended up near your village when I heard your father calling out. I couldn't ignore him. He sounded kind." Wichipee smiled faintly at those words. "He was kind," Anna added softly. "He told me I didn't need to be afraid." Tawakana's chest tightened with mixed feelings. He respected his father deeply. But the idea of a white woman walking freely into their camp could create huge danger. Still, he could not deny the sincerity in her voice, or the fear that shimmered behind her eyes. Outside, more villagers gathered, whispering and pointing toward the lodge. Some believed she was a spy, sent to learn their ways and bring back soldiers. Others feared her presence would spark conflict with settler groups already suspicious of the Sioux. But some, especially the women, saw the exhaustion on her face and felt pity. They understood the look of someone who had been running from danger. They understood the desperation of a person trying to stay alive. Inside, Anna kept speaking, one memory at a time. As if every word brought her closer to safety, "My people left me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They were supposed to protect me. But when the shooting started, everyone ran for themselves." Her hand shook harder now. "I screamed for help, but no one waited for me." That confession made Wichipee's blind eyes soften. A person abandoned by their own was a person deeply wounded. He squeezed her hand gently, and Anna closed her eyes for a moment. Letting herself feel that small kindness, Tawakana felt something shift inside him. Not trust, not yet, but something like the beginning of understanding. He had lost people too. He had seen fear carve deep scars into strong hearts. Maybe this woman carried similar scars. Hidden beneath her fragile voice, he cleared his throat and asked, "Why were you singing?" Anna looked surprised by the question, but she answered truthfully. "Your father asked me to," she said softly, "and I felt safe when I sang. It kept me from thinking about the things I lost." Wichipee nodded with a calm smile. "Her voice brings peace," the old man said. "Like the wind before a storm ends." Tawakana looked between them, his blind father, peaceful for the first time in many moons, and the lost young woman who somehow brought comfort into his dark world. He still did not trust her fully, but he could no longer see her as a threat. She was too broken, too human, too real. The village may not understand, but something important had entered their lives. A woman with a soft voice, carrying a story of survival, had stepped into their world by accident, but Tawakana could feel it already. Her presence was going to change everything. For him, for his father, and for the whole Sioux camp. The morning sun rose fully over the Sioux camp, but its warmth did little to ease the tension hanging in the air. The village was no longer quiet, and every person seemed to have only one topic to discuss: the mysterious white woman sitting inside the blind elder's lodge. Children whispered behind their mothers. Young warriors sharpened their spears with extra force, and elders sat near the fires with worried faces. Anna's presence had become a storm before it even reached its full force. Inside the lodge, Tawakana watched the woman as she sat quietly beside his father. She looked smaller now, almost like she was trying to fold herself into the shadows, avoiding every pair of suspicious eyes. Wichipi sat beside her, calm and unbothered, as if he felt her fear and wanted to protect her with the little strength he still had. For hours, the old man had refused to let her leave the lodge, saying she needed rest and shelter. Outside, however, the camp had reached a boiling point. Several women argued loudly that a stranger, especially a white one, had no place in a sacred elder's home. Some of the young warriors insisted she was a spy, maybe sent to find weaknesses in the village. "What if she brings soldiers?" one man growled. "What if she saw our horses and will lead her people here?" Fear spread quickly. Feeding on rumors and old stories, Tawakana stepped outside to quiet the growing anger. He faced the group of warriors who stood with folded arms and narrowed eyes. "She is lost," he said calmly, "and she helped my father." But his words did not calm them. They respected him as a warrior, but fear made them stubborn. "How do you know she isn't lying?" another man asked. "White people have taken land before. They will do it again." Their mistrust made Tawakana feel torn. He understood their fears. Many battles with settlers had left deep wounds on both sides. But when he looked back toward the lodge, he saw Anna gently helping his father drink water. Her hand shaking, but careful. That small act did something to him. Something he didn't want to admit yet. He felt a pull, a quiet sense that she wasn't like the others they had fought before. When he returned inside, Anna looked up at him with worried eyes. "I heard shouting," she whispered. "Are they angry because of me?" Tawakana did not sugarcoat the truth. "Yes," he said, "they fear you." "And fear becomes anger." Anna lowered her gaze, pressing her hands together as if trying to hold her fear inside her fingers. "I don't want trouble," she whispered. "I never wanted to bring danger to anyone." Wichipi reached for her hand and patted it gently. "You did not bring danger," the blind elder said. "Danger already lived in the hearts of men. You only walked into it." His words were soft, but heavy with truth. And Anna blinked back tears, grateful for the comfort. But the village continued to watch her like a wild animal cornered in their circle. Fear made even kind people behave harshly, and then something happened that made everything worse. Anna stood and moved near one of the shelves to help tidy the lodge. Her fingers brushed against a hanging item, a sacred ornament made of feathers and beads. Fragile from age and meaning, it slipped from her hand and fell to the ground, breaking one of the small bones tied to it. A loud crack echoed through the lodge. Anna gasped, stepping back in horror. "I'm sorry," she whispered quickly. "I didn't mean to." Before she finished, two older women rushed into the lodge, having heard the noise. Their eyes widened at the broken ornament. "This is a bad sign," one of them muttered. "She breaks sacred things." Another shook her head. "She should never have been allowed inside." Anna backed away, her breath shaking. "I'm sorry," she repeated. "I'll fix it, please." "I didn't know." Her voice trembled like a thin branch in a storm. Tawakana stepped between her and the women, his jaw tight with frustration. "It was an accident," he said. "She did not mean to break anything." But the women were not convinced. To them, the broken ornament was a sign, a symbol of imbalance. a warning from the spirits, and they rushed out to spread the news across the camp. Within minutes, whispers turned into loud talk. Some said Anna brought bad luck, others claimed she was cursed or dangerous. The more the story spread, the more twisted it became. People feared what they did not understand, and fear was growing like a fire without water. Back inside, Anna sat with her head lowered. Tears falling silently. "I ruin everything," she whispered. "Maybe I should leave." Wichipi placed his hand gently on hers. "No," he said, "not while fear hunts you. You are safe here." Tawakana looked at her. Seeing how small and helpless she appeared, for the first time, anger burned inside him, not at her, but at his own people. He knew the village was wrong. But he also knew they would not listen easily. He needed to protect her. But he didn't yet understand why he felt that responsibility so deeply. Outside, the camp buzzed with suspicion and fear. Inside the lodge, 3 people sat in silence, one blind. One lost, one torn between duty and sympathy. Unspoken fears filled the room, heavy as storm clouds, and Tawakana sensed that the real test was only beginning. The sun slowly dipped behind the hills, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold as the village prepared for night. Smoke rose from small fires, children were called inside, and the horses were tied safely near the fences. But even with all the familiar evening sounds, the camp felt different, unsettled, tense and unsure. The presence of the white woman, Anna, had changed everything, and everyone could feel it like a shifting wind. Inside Wichipi's lodge, Anna sat quietly. Listening to the crackling fire, her eyes were red from crying, and her hands rested in her lap, small and still, like they were afraid to move again. Wichipi breathed softly beside her, leaning back on the blankets she had arranged for him earlier. Though he could not see her, he sensed her sadness easily. "It will pass," he whispered. "Storms always do." His voice was filled with gentle wisdom, and Anna nodded weakly, trying to believe it. Tawakana stepped into the lodge with a slow, measured pace. He carried a wooden bowl of warm soup and set it down in front of her. Anna blinked in surprise. "You brought this for me?" she asked hesitantly. "Yes," he replied. "You have not eaten since morning." His voice held no softness, but it no longer carried the sharp edge it had before. She lifted the bowl with trembling hands and took a small sip. Warmth spread through her chest, easing the cold fear inside her. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't want to be a burden." Tawakana sat beside his father and watched her carefully. "You are not a burden," he said after a moment. "You are frightened." And alone, the last words escaped him before he could stop them. He wasn't sure why he said them, but they felt true. Anna looked up, her eyes meeting his in the dim firelight for the first time. She saw something in his gaze besides suspicion, something human. Thoughtful, searching, it made her straighten a little, as if someone had lifted some weight from her shoulders. Outside, the wind grew colder and darker clouds gathered above the village. A storm was coming, a real one this time, and the air grew heavy with warning. Mothers hurried their children into lodges, and warriors tied down loose items before suddenly a loud gust pushed against the lodge walls, and the flap at the entrance blew open, letting in a cold rush of air. Wichipi shivered, reaching for his blanket. Before Tawakana could move, Anna stood up quickly and closed the flap. Pressing it tightly to stop the wind, she secured the ties with steady fingers, her earlier trembling gone. Then she hurried to the old man's side and wrapped another blanket around his shoulders. "You'll get sick," she said gently. "The cold is sharp tonight." Her actions were quick, kind, and natural, like she had done this for elders her whole life. Tawakana watched silently, a strange warmth forming in his chest. It wasn't admiration exactly, nor was it simple gratitude. It was something deeper. Something he didn't know how to name yet. The storm grew louder. Rain beginning to fall in hard, fast drops. Thunder rolled across the plains, shaking the ground beneath the lodges. Anna flinched at the first loud crack, but she didn't move away from Wichipi. Instead, she held his hand with both of hers, steadying him, steadying herself. Wichipi smiled faintly. "Your hands are warm," he murmured. "The storm cannot touch me when you sit close." Anna's eyes softened. In a quiet calm spread across her face, her singing voice returned in a soft hum, just enough to ease the fear in the old man's heart. Tawakana listened to her hum in the dim light. It wasn't the same song he had heard earlier, but it carried the same gentle feeling, a feeling of peace, of comfort, of home. The warrior realized he hadn't heard anything so calming in many moons. It made him sit quietly, letting his breath slow. Letting his mind settle, after a long silence, he spoke. His voice low and honest. "You helped my father more than any healer in the village." Anna looked at him with surprise. "I only sang," she said softly. "Sometimes," Tawakana replied. "A voice can heal more than herbs." The storm continued to roar outside. But inside the lodge, something different was happening. A small bridge was forming, not built by trust yet, but built by humanity, shared fear, and small acts of kindness. Anna shifted closer to the fire, warming her hands. Tawakana watched her with calmer eyes, trying to understand this strange feeling growing inside him. He had been raised to be cautious, to protect his people, to fear danger from outsiders, but tonight, while the wind screamed against the walls and the rain hit the earth like arrows, he couldn't see Anna as danger. He saw a lonely soul trying to survive. Just like anyone else, Wichipi rested peacefully. Leaning against the young woman who had become his unexpected comfort, Anna sat quietly, humming softly. Tawakana stayed near the fire, listening to her voice blend with the storm outside. For the first time since she arrived, the lodge felt warm, safe, almost whole again. The bond forming between them was small, fragile, and unspoken, but it was real, and it was only the beginning. Days passed slowly after the storm, and although the sky cleared, the tension inside the Sioux camp did not. Some villagers watched Anna with guarded eyes, waiting for a mistake, while others softened a little after seeing how gently she cared for Wichipi. Still doubt lingered like a shadow no wind could chase away. Tawakana stayed close to the lodge whenever he could. He told himself it was only to protect his father, but deep inside, he knew there was another reason, something he didn't want to name yet. Anna continued helping, sweeping the lodge, preparing water, singing softly whenever Wichipi felt pain in his old bones. Her voice filled the lodge like sunlight slipping through a small opening, warming everything it touched. One morning, as she fetched water from the nearby stream, she felt the forest watching her. A strange, distant feeling crawled up her spine, making her turn around again and again. The trees stood quiet, but the silence felt wrong. She hurried back to the camp with quick steps, clutching the water bowl tightly. When she reached the lodge, Tawakana noticed her pale face. "What happened?" he asked sharply. I don't know," she whispered. "I felt something. Someone watching." Tawakana's eyes narrowed. It wasn't like her to complain without reason. Before he could speak further, a loud shout echoed from the edge of the camp. Warriors ran toward the entrance, spears raised, horses stomping nervously in the dust. Tawakana rushed out. Ordering Anna to stay inside, she obeyed, but fear twisted in her chest. Something was coming, something bigger than whispers and mistrust. At the border of the camp, 5 men on horseback appeared. Their clothes, hats, and weapons marked them clearly. Settlers armed and angry, dust clung to their boots, and 2 of them carried rifles at their sides. Their leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward with a tense jaw. "We're looking for a white woman," he called out loudly. "She went missing days ago." The warriors stood firm, silent, watching him with cold eyes. Tawakana stepped ahead of them, his voice strong but controlled. "What woman?" he asked. Though he already knew the answer, the scarred man spat into the dirt. "She was traveling with us, got scared and ran into the woods like a fool. We came to take her back." The word "take" stabbed through the air like a blade behind the men. 2 others exchanged looks, uneasy ones, as if they knew the truth wasn't so simple. Tawakana's chin lifted. "She is safe here," he said, "and she will speak for herself." Before the settlers could answer, Anna stepped out from behind the lodge door. She kept her distance, but her presence made the men shift uneasily. One of the younger men muttered under his breath, "I told you she'd be alive." The leader's eyes narrowed at her. "Get your things," he ordered gruffly. "You're coming back." Anna shook her head, her hands trembling. "No," she said softly but clearly, "I'm not going back with you." The leader's face twisted with anger. "You don't get to choose." He growled, "You belong with us." His voice carried a threat she knew too well. Tawakana stepped between them instantly. "No one owns her," he said firmly. "You speak to her as if she is property." "She is not," the settler scoffed, gripping his rifle tighter. "She's ours because she came with us. Or did she forget how we saved her from dying in the cold?" Anna's voice broke. "You didn't save me." She whispered, "You left me. You left me when the gunfire started." She hugged her arms tightly around herself, reliving that moment of abandonment. "You ran." Everyone ran. They didn't even look back. A few warriors murmured among themselves. Truth spoke loudly in her trembling voice. Even the younger settlers lowered their heads in shame. Tawakana's jaw clenched, his anger slowly rising like fire inside him. "You would abandon her and still claim her," he said. "That is not courage. That is cowardice." The scarred leader glared at him, hate filling his eyes. He lifted his rifle slightly. "We're taking her," he said, "and if you stand in the way, we'll deal with you too." Warriors behind Tawakana raised their spears, forming a line of strength. The air grew sharp. Every breath filled with tension, the village women pulled their children into lodges. Knowing danger could explode any minute, Anna shook her head again, this time with more strength. "I'm not going back," she said. "I'd rather stay here." "Even if I die," her voice cracked, but her determination did not. She stood behind Tawakana, trusting him, trusting the safety she felt near him. Wichipi, who had slowly walked out with the help of a young boy, lifted his blind eyes toward the settlers. "She is not your burden," he said quietly. "She is only a lost soul looking for a place to live in peace." His voice was soft, but carried the weight of a wise elder. The settlers hesitated, but only for a moment. Fear and anger can blind men faster than darkness. And Tawakana realized something with painful clarity. This was not just a simple argument. This was a threat, a real one, and the village stood on the edge of danger. The next move would decide everything. The standoff at the edge of the Sioux camp grew sharper with every breath. Wind pushed dust across the ground, horses stamped nervously, and the settlers' fingers rested dangerously close to their rifle triggers. Behind Tawakana, Anna stood frozen, fear tightening her chest like a rope. Every memory of being abandoned rushed back. And for a moment, she felt like that night was happening all over again. The scarred settler glared at the Sioux warriors. "You have 5 seconds," he growled. "Move aside, or we take her by force." His voice was thick with anger, but underneath it, there was something else, pride mixed with fear, the kind of fear that makes men act foolishly. The kind that destroys lives. Tawakana felt his muscles tighten. He had fought enemies before, but this moment felt heavier. Now, this wasn't about land or horses or revenge. This was about a woman who had suffered enough. A woman who had brought peace to his father with nothing but her soft voice. He stepped forward, placing himself fully between Anna and the settlers. "Point your guns at me if you wish," he said calmly, "but you will not touch her." The warriors behind him straightened, their spears ready, a wall of courage forming silently around him. The scarred leader laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You would risk your whole village for a stranger," he spat. "A white woman your people should fear." Wakana did not flinch. "She is not a danger," he said. "You are." The settlers shifted uncomfortably. Even they felt the truth in his words. One of the younger men whispered, "Maybe we should leave." But the leader snapped at him to be quiet. Pride can make a man deaf. And this man refused to hear anything except the echo of his own anger. Anna stepped out from behind Tawakana, her voice trembling but steady. "I won't go with you," she said. "I'd rather die here than return to the people who abandoned me." Her words rang through the air like a bell. Even the horses seemed to stop breathing for a moment. The settlers stared at her in shock. "You're making a mistake," one muttered. But even he didn't sound convinced. Anna shook her head slowly. "The mistake was trusting you." Tawakana looked at her, seeing strength he hadn't expected. The woman who had once trembled in fear now stood with the courage of someone who had lost everything and found nothing left to fear. A strange rush of pride filled his chest. He did not understand it, but he felt it deeply. Wichipee, supported by a young boy, took a step forward. His blind eyes looked empty, but his voice carried sharp clarity. "This woman brought peace into my home," he said, "and any soul who brings peace must be protected." His words were simple, but they silenced the entire gathering. The scarred leader glared at the old man. "We're taking her," he repeated stubbornly, raising his rifle a little higher, but Tawakana was faster. He stepped directly in front of the barrel, staring straight into the settler's eyes. "You fire that gun," he said quietly, "and it will be the last mistake you make." His voice was steady, heavy, and frightening in its certainty. He didn't shout, didn't threaten wildly. He spoke like a man who had already decided his fate, a man who would die before he allowed injustice. The warriors behind him lifted their spears. The tension in the air tightened like a bowstring pulled to its limit. Even the settlers felt the danger now. It wasn't just Tawakana. It was the entire village prepared to defend one fragile outsider. The leader hesitated. Fear cracked through his anger for the first time. He glanced at his men, hoping for support, but their eyes were full of doubt. They had come expecting to intimidate a village, but face a wall of courage they could never break. One whispered, "This isn't worth dying for." Another muttered, "Let's go." The scarred man's face twisted with frustration. But when he saw his men backing away, he finally lowered his rifle. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Tawakana didn't move. "Leave," he said simply, "before regret becomes yours." The settlers turned their horses and rode off, their pride wounded, but their lives spared. Dust rose behind them until they disappeared into the horizon, leaving silence in their place. Anna collapsed to her knees, shaking with relief. Tawakana knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You are safe now," he said softly. "No one will take you." The village watched in stunned silence. Never before had a warrior risked so much for a stranger, especially a white woman. But Tawakana's choice had been clear, strong, unshakable. And as the villagers slowly gathered around, unsure what to say, one thing was certain: what he had done that day left everyone speechless. The settlers disappeared into the horizon, but their dust stayed in the air long after they were gone. A quiet, heavy silence settled over the Sioux village as everyone tried to understand what had just happened. No one had expected Tawakana to stand in front of a loaded rifle, and no one had expected him to defend Anna with such fierce courage. Warriors exchanged long looks, mothers held their children a little tighter, and elders whispered among themselves. The village had changed in one moment, a moment no one could forget. Anna still knelt on the ground, her breath shaky and broken. Her mind replayed the scene again and again. The raised rifle, the shouting, the fear that had nearly crushed her spirit. But then she remembered Tawakana's voice, firm and calm, shielding her like a wall of stone. She lifted her head slowly, seeing him kneel beside her, his hand still resting gently on her shoulder. The warmth of his touch made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt for years. "You're safe," Tawakana repeated quietly, his eyes soft for the first time since she arrived. Anna nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I thought they would kill me," she whispered. "I thought I would lose everything again." Tawakana shook his head. "You are not alone anymore," he said. "Not here." A few villagers approached carefully, unsure how to react. Some still feared Anna, others were confused. But now they saw her differently. They had watched the settlers try to drag her away like a trapped animal. They had heard the truth of her abandonment from her own trembling voice. And most of all, they had seen their bravest warrior choose to stand for her. Wichipee walked forward slowly. Supported by the same young boy, his blind eyes looked empty, but his face carried quiet strength. "Bring her to the fire," the old man said. "Let the village see she is not an enemy." Tawakana helped Anna stand, and together they moved toward the center of the camp. A large fire burned there, its flames dancing as the sky turned deep purple with the coming night. The villagers gathered in a circle. Keeping a respectful distance, Anna stood beside Tawakana. Feeling the weight of every eye on her, Her hands shook again, but she didn't hide them. She had hidden enough in her life. Wichipi stepped into the circle first, raising his hand for silence. "Today," he said calmly, "we saw anger, fear, and danger, but we also saw courage." In truth, his voice moved through the crowd like a warm wind. "This woman brought peace to my home, not harm." Anna lowered her head humbly as the elder continued. "She cared for me when my own strength failed. She sang for my spirit when it was weak. And no soul who brings healing should be treated with hate," the villagers murmured softly. Some nodding slowly with understanding, others still struggled with old fears. But Wichipi's words carried weight that no one could ignore. Tawakana stepped forward, his presence commanding respect. "She stays here," he said firmly, "until she chooses her own path. She will not be forced. Not by settlers, not by fear, and not by us." The crowd looked at him with surprise. It was rare for a warrior to speak such strong words about an outsider, but Tawakana's tone left no room for argument. He wasn't asking permission, he was making a promise. Anna looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "You're giving me a home," she whispered under her breath. Tawakana met her gaze. "I'm giving you safety," he replied. "Something you should have had long ago." Women from the village stepped forward at last. One offered Anna a warm blanket, another brought food. These small gestures made Anna's heart ache in a new way, not with fear, but with gratitude. The kindness she had been denied by her own people was now being given to her by strangers. Strangers who were slowly becoming something more. Night settled fully over the village, and the fire crackled brightly. Wichipi asked Anna to sing for the gathering. She hesitated, nervous, but then she nodded softly. "If it brings peace," she whispered. Her voice rose gently into the night, soft and smooth. Filled with pain and hope woven together, the entire village listened in silence. Even the wind seemed to pause for a moment. Even the horses stood still as if soothed by the melody. When she finished, many villagers looked changed, calmer. Softer, more understanding, her song had reached them. Just as it had reached Wichipi days before. Tawakana watched her with quiet admiration. Something new had formed between them. Something neither could explain. Respect, trust, maybe something deeper, waiting in the shadows of their hearts. Either way, the choice he made today had changed everything. For Anna, for the village, and for Tawakana himself. And none of them knew that the greatest change was yet to come.